beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was beautiful. And thank you to Bob and to Clay.
Yes.
We are so grateful for you. When Asha and the band were practicing that song, many of you know Nick, who was in Sunday school. He came zooming in here and started yelling, "My favorite song!" And he sang the whole thing. He knows it because he watches Pocahontas every day. Yes. Well, welcome. Thank you for coming. That was just beautiful. That is, as we say, a hard act to follow. So, as Asha said, my talk today is called To the Seventh Generation. And what we are doing is we are continuing our series on indigenous wisdom. So, those of you who were here last week heard Brian Perry, who was excellent, and we were so glad he was here. And one of the things he said, he gave us the notion that we are all caretakers. We are all caretakers, we are all caregivers of ourselves and of each other. Whether it's a natural disaster, illness, job change, death, some sort of loss, what do? We take it upon ourselves to comfort each other, to hold each other, to help us rebuild, to help us get started again, to sustain each other so that we know that better days are ahead. That's just in our DNA. That's what we do. We here at One World know that we are all connected. We talk about that a lot. We talk about how we are all of the one. Martin Luther King Jr. called it a network of mutuality, which is an image that I just love. Thich Nhat Hanh says we all, and what is the word he uses? We all inter-are. Isn't that great? Sometimes you just got to make up new words. We all inter-are. We are all that fundamentally and viscerally and organically connected. What happens to you, happens to me, happens to all of us. It just is the way it is. The closer we awaken, the closer we come to awakening, the more we know that is the truth of who we all are. And it's not just us humans. What in the Native American tradition are going to be called the two-legged. We have focused on us for so long, but it's the four-legged, it's the flying, it's the swimming, it's the buzzing, it's the crawling, it's the mountains, the rocks, and the seas. We all inter-are. We sometimes can't see that because we're so limited by our vision, by our senses, by our hearing. We see through that glass darkly, but if we were able to take a full and a truthful look, we would realize with that aha moment how connected we all truly are. So today, what I want to do is I want to widen that circle of interbeing, that circle of us all being inter-are to the future, to those who come after us, to those who follow. What wisdom can we learn about what we owe them, about what awareness we need to have of them? What can we do in our lives here to be regarded by those yet to come as beloved ancestors? One of the things I learned as I was studying these traditions was that in order to be an ancestor, you have to do more than just be here and live a while and die. You need to live a life of wisdom, of judgment, of integrity, of truth. You need to grow into your being as an ancestor. And what are we doing here and now in order to do that? The seventh generation idea is also called the seventh generation principle, and it comes to us, as we know, from Native American wisdom. What does it teach? It teaches that in every decision, whether it be individual, community, civic, we must consider how our choice will affect those who come after, 7 generations down. That is a paradigm we don't normally have, but it's one I invite us to entertain today. Will the choices that we make now permit those yet unborn to enjoy the water, the air, the resources, the abundance, the beauty we see around us, the beauty we drove through to get here? Will it be here for them in 7 generations? Are we leaving them the sustaining, the magnificent creation that we inherited? So we in the West normally consider a generation to be how many years? This is not a test. Yes, 25. In the Lakota tradition, a generation is 100 years. So 7 generations is going to be 700 years. Based on our lifestyles today, think about it. What will our Earth, what will our mother look like in 700 years? So as I was preparing this talk, I came across a TED Talk from a scientist named Carolyn Raffensperger, who's executive director of the Science and Environmental Health Network. She spoke of an experience she had several years ago when she had been called to write a protocol for safeguarding an abandoned gold mine up near the Arctic Circle. It was called the Giant Mine. Now, we normally wouldn't think that an abandoned gold mine would have any environmental hazard. It would not need a whole lot of protecting. But the problem with this one was that the mining had resulted in the creation of, let me get this number right, 237,000 tons of arsenic trioxide dust, which is, I mean, it just sounds bad. I don't even know what that is, but it's highly toxic even in small doses. This dust had been blown back into the mine and it had been sealed in it, along with tons of other toxins, and it had to be sealed off. So what happened? Vegetation died, wildlife, if they even survived, fled, and the area in general became toxic and highly dangerous. So scientists estimate that this mine will remain toxic, I'm glad we're all seated, for 250,000 years. Using the Lakota metric of 100 years, do the math, that is 2,500 generations. Using the shorter method of 25 years, it's 10,000 generations. The Giant Mine is obviously not the only example of the long-term physical scars that we leave. As of September 2018, there were 1,345 Superfund sites in the U.S. alone, identified as those sites that require long-term cleanup, long-term care, isolation to clean up hazardous and toxic conditions. In January of 2016, there were 16 of them right here in Georgia. These sites, all around the country, and expand that to the world, are examples of human disregard for the natural resources that were given to us to treasure and to safeguard. They are multiplied around the planet, and they exemplify the attitude of what? Disregard, exploitation, and plunder and reckless consumption that now threatens our very future. It's funny, when I talk to my daughter Catherine about environmentalism, she always talks about saving the planet. And I always say, the planet will still be here. We're not talking about the planet. It's going to be different. We're talking about saving life on it. Look in the mirror, honey. It's about saving our environmental integrity. It's about saving our future 7 and more generations down. We have become out of balance, taking and consuming resources as if there are no consequences. However, one thing we know is that there are always consequences. And we're experiencing now globally. But here's the thing about tragedy. Nobody experiences a tragedy globally, do we? We experience a tragedy when the water's coming up to our front door, when the rain is taking down our roof. We experience these consequences very locally. We see wildfires, flooding, weather extremes. Right now, aid workers, as I talked about during prayer time, are all rushing to Southeast Africa to help those recover from Cyclone Idai, which is one of the worst tropical storms on record to affect Africa and the Southern Hemisphere as a whole. For years, we have known, 50 years or more, we have known that carbon dioxide was a heat-trapping gas, and too much of it would trap heat close to the earth and cause oceans to warm. What happened? Because we're so funny, because it's not right in front of our face, because the water's not coming right up to our door. We just kept doing what we are doing, continuing our love affair with fossil fuels, and now we are beginning to pay the price. You know me, I love doing research on this stuff. So here we go. Before the 18th century, when we in the industrial West began to burn coal, oil, and gas, our atmosphere typically contained about 280 parts per million of carbon dioxide. 280. Those are the conditions, Cornell University scientists write, on which civilization developed and to which life on Earth is adapted. That's where we're best. That's what they call in the environmental world the sweet spot, 280 parts per million. Starting in 2004, CO2 concentrations crossed 400 parts per million for the first time in 2.5 million years. And since then, I saw a chart, it's never gone below that. What does that mean for generations to come? 400 parts per million is what many Earth scientists see as the tipping point, leading to irreversible changes in major ecosystems and in our planetary climate system. Life on Earth becomes unsustainable in the long term, after 350 parts per million, and we are past it. There is a website which leads to data from the Mauna Loa Observatory in Hawaii. On Friday, March 22nd, the last count that they posted, the count was 410.13. It's just been going up and staying above that 400 point. Rising sea levels with increasing acidity. What does that do? I mean, as we sit here in our room, people say rising sea levels, acidity. What does it do? It changes our global weather patterns. What is the U.S.? It's the breadbasket of the world, right? What is going to be the breadbasket of the world in 100 years? It's going to be Canada, because warmth is moving up. Now, maybe some of these changes are inevitable. I don't know. I'm not a climate scientist. But what I am told when I look into this is that the intensity of weather changes as a result of climate change. Biodiversity decreases. It threatens our food supplies as well as the ability of our oceans to sustain life. Biodiversity is critical. We may think they're pesky bugs, but believe me, we need them way more than they need us. And we also use so much more than we need. We're just not thinking. We're just using so much more than we need. The World Wildlife Fund says we are using 25% more natural resources than the planet can sustain. We consume all we can for as long as we can, as much as we can, and then we say, well, I'll be gone. It's someone else's problem. I've had relatives who have said that. 20, 30 years ago, we were talking to relatives about climate change, and they said, I don't care, I'll be dead. Okay. I challenge us to change our paradigm and start adopting the Native American wisdom of making those choices that will benefit those 7 generations out. Our wisdom traditions teach us to care for our natural world with love and respect. Why? Because, back to the first part of the talk, we are all one. We cannot treat it as something to which we are not connected. As 19th century Lakota leader Sitting Bull said, every seed is awakened and so is all animal life. It is through this mysterious power that we too have our being. And we therefore yield to our animal neighbors the same right as ourselves to inhabit this land. Looking at the Hebrew scriptures, at Genesis, teaches that God gave man dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the air and over the cattle and over all the wild animals of the earth and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. We're all familiar with that. And indeed, a lot of folks will refer to those passages to say, well, God gave it to us. We are supposed to use what we need. We are supposed to do. We are in charge. This is why it's important to read on. Context is critical. When we read on, we see that we are not alone in having been gifted this wonderful creation. The passage goes on to say in verse 30, and to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creeps upon the earth wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for food. And it was so. We are not the only beneficiaries of the gift. As we are all connected, we are all recipients. It was given to all of us. Now, we happen to be the ones with the power to change it, with the power to destroy it, with the power to make these long-term impacts. But that only communicates to us a greater responsibility. And what's the word that comes up here? It's not dominion. It is what? It is stewardship. Yes, the word is stewardship. The way we care for our planet, the way we care for our delicate, lovely, beautiful home is an inevitable extension of our connection to each other, our connection to spirit. We are taking care of God's world for the time that we are here, and then we pass it on better than we found it. There's a Native American proverb that says, treat the earth well. It was not given to you by your parents. It was loaned to you by your children. Doesn't that change the energy? It is loaned to us by our children. It's past time for us to engage as loving stewards of our earth, as beloved ancestors of those who follow. It is time for us communally and globally to see, to turn, to treasure what it is we have been given. As the Cree proverb says, only after the last tree has been cut down, only after the last river has been poisoned, only after the last fish has been caught, only then will you find that money cannot be eaten. We here in this room, I know these faces who are looking back at me, we do all we can. We recycle, we, even beyond recycling, what's the new thing? Just don't buy it in the first place, right? One of us was talking about going an entire year without buying plastic. I don't even know if that's doable, but this is the paradigms we need to start thinking about. If we are going to individually and then locally and then communally and then globally make these changes. Okay, so let's broaden this principle. Often the seventh generation principle is just seen as one relating to environmentalism, but I want to think a little broader about it today. The seventh generation principle can be seen in a broader context. When we look at our civic fabric today, at our society today, at our communal norms today, the norms we create, the norms we accept, the norms we follow, are we building a communal model that we are proud to pass on? Are we building a way of living together? Are we building a way of thriving together in this new world, which is smaller, which is so much more connected, that we are proud to pass on? We can take this principle and apply it there as well. Do we have a new conscience of interbeing on a global scale? How do we approach that? How we relate to each other, how we care for each other. Now that is very tough for us here in the West. Why? Because we are all cowboys, right? We grew up with John Wayne. When you think of the notion of human rights, for example, in Europe or in other parts of the world, what is human rights there? The right to food, the right to shelter, the right to water, the right to living. Here, human rights are what? The right to be left alone. Very different. We just have a different look. Our operating system here in the U.S. is don't tread on me, right? Don't tread on me. That means I'm self-sustaining. I'm an individual. I'm even better. I'm a rugged individual. And I can do it all myself. It may be time for a new paradigm. It may be time for a shift. If that paradigm was ever even sustainable, I suggest that perhaps it no longer is, because we are so connected. I just love the new generations coming up because they know that. You can see them as they get together, as they protest, as they march, as they demand better conditions for their future. They know that. It is a new consciousness that is developing, and I just love to see it. So how do we adopt that? How do we pick a model for how we relate to each other, even those we don't know, even those we will never meet? I think what we do is we look how we treat those who are our beloved. Why? Because in this new model, we all need to be our beloved. In our families, with our close friends. Is it all about me? Is it, I got mine, you get yours? No. In our families, what do? We love each other. We watch out for each other. We support each other. We pick each other up. We help in times of trouble. We preserve our cowboy mentality, our don't tread on me, for those who are the other, those whom we don't know, those whom we fear, those whom we have not met. However, that model is gone. That group no longer exists. You know, a word we hear a lot today is tribal. My tribe, your tribe, that tribe. Okay, it's one tribe. We are just kidding ourselves when we say, your tribe is not my tribe. Oh no. You get in that spaceship, you look down at that beautiful, delicate Earth, that shot Earthrise, remember that beautiful shot Earthrise? It's all the same tribe. We don't see lines, we don't see borders, we don't see walls. We see all of us just rocketing along on that beautiful planet together. We are all interbeing. We all inter-are. So what paradigm works here? What paradigm can we start putting in place right now, us right here? When the Dalai Lama turned 80, back in June of 2015. His translator, Thupten Jinpa, called author and psychologist Daniel Goleman, who had long been a friend of the Dalai Lama's, and asked him to write a book for the Dalai Lama's 80th birthday. The Dalai Lama believed, since he was turning 80, it was time to put in a book to pass on his wisdom to the world, his roadmap to a better, kinder, and more compassionate future for humanity. So Goleman agreed. He spent many hours talking with the Dalai Lama, and the result was a book called A Force for Good, the Dalai Lama's vision for our world. So they also have a website. I think it's aforceforgood.org. You can go to it. It's a wonderful website. So what is his message? After a lifetime of service and observation and developing in wisdom and teaching and just being in the world, his message was simple. The world needs each of us, each individual, us sitting in this room, to realize that we can each be a force for good. It's not up to someone else. Someone else plays their part, but we can each be a force for good. The transformation of our world begins with what? The transformation of each one of us. Not only that, that's just not a nice to have. We don't just put that on a pillow and put it on the sofa. We start. We start right now. So where does he tell us to start? We circle back to compassion. We circle back to that heart space that connects us with each other. Now for the Dalai Lama, compassion is not just a rosy outlook. It's not just some kind of goopy feeling, isn't that a great word, wanting everyone to be happy. It's what he calls muscular compassion. He calls for a muscular compassion in all area of our lives together. It's compassion that shapes a future where boots on the ground shape a future which is livable, which is sustainable, that supports life. Where? In business, in economics, in our civic fabric, in education, in politics, in government, in all the many ways we fashion our lives together. We shift the way we look. It's no longer all about me, it's about us. That is a aha moment. That is a powerful paradigm change. He says the mark of a compassionate society can be found in how it treats those people most distant from the center of power, whether because of group identity, gender, class, wealth, or those generations yet unborn. How do we treat those? How do we treat those? The furthest from the center of power, right? That is a new thought for us. That gives us a moment to reflect, to make new choices. The Dalai Lama was keenly influenced by Gandhi, and one of the notes that he remarked upon that was found upon Gandhi in his diary after his death was this: recall the face of the poorest and the weakest man whom you may have seen, and ask yourself if the step you contemplate is going to be of any use to him. Wow. What a new energy for us, because we're all about getting to the top. We're all about being the best. We're watching on the news this whole academic scandal, paying gazillions of dollars to get your kids into the best schools, because that's what power buys. Because that's what we want. That's what we want to be. It's time for a new paradigm. It's time for a way to structure our civic fabric so that 7 generations out, or 1 or 2, we will have a society we are proud to pass on. 3 generations from now, people will be reading about us going, I am so grateful to what those people did for us. Look at our world now because of what they did. Look at our world now because of what the giants ahead of us have done. Right? The scientists, the philosophers, the theologians, the shoulders on which we stand are so broad and so wonderful, and they have given us such a world to treasure. And the question then becomes, what do we do with it? Remember the passage I read a few weeks ago about the presence of the ancestors as people, as the white folks who took over Native American grounds, built cities and highways. It was a beautifully evocative passage that I read from Black Elk Speaks. And he talks about how even when we walk the streets of our cities and we drive down our highways, the ancestors are there. in sorrow because they once walked this sacred ground. They once traveled those sacred hills. Next to the ancestors, who else is there? We can't see them, we can't hear them, but they're there, generations to come. Next to them, travel our children yet unborn, asking, what will you do? What will you give? What will you be so that we have a world that will sustain us, that will give us joy, and in which we can live? You know, it's funny, sometimes people talk about spirituality and religion as a way to get past this world, to get us into the other world, as a stopping point to salvation. But that's not the way I see it. The reason we are here is to learn how to be fully human together. That's why we're here. If there wasn't a reason for it, we wouldn't be here. We are here to learn how to be wonderfully and crazily and fully human all together. That is how we express our spirituality. That is how we express the God in us, the God around us, the God through us. As St. Irenaeus said, the glory of God is the human being fully alive. Religion doesn't take us away from life. Religion and our spirituality leads us deeper into it. It leads us deeper into our connections. It leads us deeper into how we live together in integrity and joy and peace and creativity for a future that is just as wonderful as our present, or better. Thomas Merton once said that we may spend our whole lives climbing the ladder of success, only to find when we get to the top that our ladder has been leaning against the wrong wall. Mm-hmm. You sometimes feel that? Mm-hmm. Maybe we are not here for individual success, for our 15 seconds of fame, whatever network you want to be on. We often reflect on how lucky we are to have been sent here right now, to be here right now at this pivotal, this transitional time. We are here. The universe selected us, perhaps caring for our planet, caring for each other, caring for those to follow, is really the reason that we were born, woke up, grew up, and are here. That is the thought I leave you with for today. What choices do we make that will make us the beloved ancestors we hope to be for those yet unborn? Wow. Thank you.